If you carry a firearm and discharge your weapon in self-defense, you could face hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees and expenses. So carry the protection of CCW Safe, Self-Defense Legal Services membership. Upfront payment of all criminal and civil defense costs with no out-of-pocket for members.
And we are back. I'm Chris Evans, CEO of Survival Dispatch, joined today by my good friend Jeff MD, former CIA operative, author extraordinaire, 007. And actually, we're going to add a new title to Jeff tonight, but we've got breaking news that we have to cover before we get to that. So stay tuned. That's, I think it's number 4 or 5 on the announcement list here tonight. So first and foremost, we're going to get the conflicted question out of the way. It's a short one. And then we'll start rolling with the breaking news. So today's conflicted question: you and your group have been surviving at your retreat after the SHTF, but other people weren't so lucky. From time to time, someone finds your group, and begs for food. Today, however, a man is asking for some type of a test or a way to prove he is worthy to be part of your group. What would you tell him? Hang out to the end. We'll wrap up around an hour from now, and Jeff and I will answer that question. However, breaking news for those of you who have not caught this: Trump announces a ceasefire between Iran and Israel starting in 6 hours. Posted by Trump not too long ago on Truth Social. Congratulations to everyone. It has been fully agreed by and between Israel and Iran that there will be a complete and total ceasefire in approximately 6 hours from now, when Israel and Iran have wound down and completed their in-progress final missions for 12 hours, at which point the war will be considered ended. So 6 hours from now, ceasefire. 12 hours after that, considered a ceasefire. Ended officially. Iran will start the ceasefire, and upon the 12th hour, Israel will start the ceasefire. And upon the 24th hour, an official end to the 12-day war will be saluted by the world. During each ceasefire, the other side will remain peaceful and respectful. On the assumption that everything works as it should, which it will, I would like to congratulate both countries, Israel and Iran, on having the stamina, courage, and intelligence to end what should be called the 12-day war. This is a war that could have gone on for years and destroyed the entire Middle East, but it didn't and never will. God bless Israel. God bless Iran. God bless the Middle East. God bless the United States of America. And God bless the world. From Donald Trump. So short video with JD Vance. He was on air with Brett Baer when Donald Trump posted the notice that the war is over, the conflict is over. 1 minute, 13 seconds. We'll play this, and then Jeff and I will get into describing our thoughts on this development.
When I left the White House, I thought that we might be able to get it across the finish line before this broadcast, and it looks like the president has been able to do that. I mean, look, he's been working the phones constantly, frankly, before the 12-day war started, but certainly over the past 12 days, the president's been extremely clear about America's national objective here. It is to create a world where Iran cannot build a nuclear weapon. We, of course, destroyed the nuclear program that they had, and the president told the entire team, we're going to work to make sure that they don't try to rebuild that nuclear capability in the future. And it's, look, this is a great thing. For Israel, think about this. They've accomplished an important military objective. They've helped us destroy the Iranian nuclear program. They've also destroyed the conventional missile capability of Iran that threatened the country of Israel. For the Iranians, I think this is a new opportunity to actually pursue the path of peace. As I said yesterday, what the Iranians have showed through their support of terror networks, through their now failed effort to build a nuclear weapon, is that they're just not very good at war. And I think the president really hit the reset button and said, look, let's actually produce long-term peace for the region. That's always been his goal. I actually think when we look back, we will say the 12-day war was an important reset moment for the entire region.
So I'm watching JD there, by the way, Jeff. And then I'm thinking of this next post from Bad Hombre, which was 5 hours ago. So this is prior to the ceasefire being announced. And I'm thinking to myself, JD Vance is salivating over all of these things plus the ceasefire. So Bad Hombre 5 hours ago, Iran's nuclear facilities have been destroyed. All of Iran's missiles fired at U.S. bases were intercepted. Qatar is now furious with Iran and wants to have a go at them. Oil prices are falling. As always, not a single panicking prediction came true. And now we have this ceasefire. Jeff, I'm going to let you take first swing at this. Thoughts on these developments?
Well, it's great news. I mean, anytime you stop a war, people don't have to die needlessly. It's great news. And I think it's, while it's a win for the world and it's a win for the Iranian people, it's definitely a loss for the Iranian regime. And I honestly think that they probably did it. The people who negotiated it on behalf of the Iranians did it because it's like, well, if this thing goes on much longer, I'm going to be on the hit list and I will die too. And so, there was a joke thing, I think it was the Babylon Bee said, every Iranian general who's still alive is going, hey, what am I, chopped liver? Why am I not on the list?
Right.
So I think it was inevitable. And, the whole thing to shut down the Strait of Hormuz, Iran would have been, I put it a little indelicate during our pre-show talking, they would have shot themselves in the foot. I talked about putting an appendage in a ringer because all of their export facilities, all of their oil export facilities are west of the Strait of Hormuz. If they close the Strait of Hormuz, they can export oil to anyone at all at any price. So they would have cut off the lifeblood of their economy. And if the war had continued, how long before Israel starts targeting infrastructure, such as power plants, water desalination plants, water treatment plants, sewage plants, things like that. And it would have made a lot, if you took out the power grid of Iran, which Israel could have done in a day, in the middle of summer, where it can get up to 125, 130 degrees, and it would have created incredible suffering on the Iranian people. But it's a strategic military target. It's legitimate, and it would have put immense pressure on the regime. The locals would have said, "Okay, screw this." But it may come to that still. And I don't trust the Iranians. I suspect if they were able to squirrel away their 60% enriched and put it somewhere that no one knows about, could they enrich that up to bomb grade at some point? Yeah, they know how to build centrifuges. We blew up their centrifuge. Well, we did. The Israelis blew up their centrifuge factories. We blew up their centrifuge plants. But at some point in the future, they have the technology. If they really decide to, we'll have to keep an eye on them, and so will the Israelis, to make sure that they are not, trying to take that stuff and make bombs out of it. And it's going to be really important that the IAEA, which is the International Agency for Atomic Energy, gets into Fernal, gets into Isfahan, and we'll be able to get in there too and take samples, and we'll be able to determine, how much, was the 60% stuff there? Was it blown up? Was it released at all? And find out what happened to it. And if it's buried under Fernal, under 1 million tons of rock, wonderful. But if they squirreled it away, someone's gonna have to come up and say, "Okay, you guys got to come clean. You gotta turn that shit over."
So much like most countries in the world, I think the vast majority of people on this planet are good, decent people. But we've got some really horrible governments. So when I refer to the Iranians, and it doesn't, whether it's Iran or not, absolute power corrupts absolutely. But when we speak towards the Iranians, we're speaking with regards to this regime, the Ayatollahs, whatever you want to call them, the mullahs, not necessarily towards the Iranian people. And I've mentioned how I was identified as being from Survival Dispatch at Sam's Wholesale, and by an Iranian guy who claimed to be a commando, and he probably was. And I've had a good exchange with him the past 24 hours, and I'll share some of that in a minute. But while you were talking, Jeff, and you were saying, essentially Iran would be cutting off their nose to spite their face if they had to close the Strait of Hormuz. I'm thinking to myself, there's quite a few losers here, okay? So first and foremost, I would say the Democrats are losers because they've been pounding the drums for the past however many hours, almost 48 hours, that Trump is going to lead us into a 20-year war. And he said he was the president of peace, and he's anything but. So they lose from this. The legacy media loses from this because they can't sell their fear porn on this particular topic now. And so I told you before we started, I've got an Amazon Fire plugged into a monitor over this way, and I let it play in the background. And I purposely expose myself to the legacy media so I can hear what they're up to.
Have you been vaccinated?
No, I actually,
legacy media.
Well, I'm one of the few purebloods left. They say 19% of us are purebloods, but
no, I mean vaccinated against the legacy media.
I know I haven't had that vaccine. I tolerate it, but my point is this: since Saturday evening, I have lost track of how many times I've heard them state on ABC News the words regime change.
Yeah,
I mean, it's almost like it's on, auto repeat or something along those lines. So, in addition to that, the anti-Trumpers, like the Lincoln Project and, Rick Wilson and all those clowns, they lose out on this. I've lost a fair bit of respect over the years for a few prominent people, and I've voiced it on here before. I can't stand Steve Bannon. Never could. The guy is full of himself, thinks he's far more important than he is. Now, I don't think he deserved to go to prison. I think that was total BS on the part of the Biden admin. But I can't stand him. And he's partners with Charlie Kirk in Turning Point USA. And when they threw the J6ers out this year, I started to lose respect for Charlie Kirk. That doesn't mean he's not intelligent. It doesn't mean that I don't appreciate a lot of his arguments and his quick thinking. But this whole civil war that the other side's trying to portray in the MAGA world doesn't exist. You have a handful of people whose egos are ginormous, and they're making themselves look like fools. I mean, even on the other side, like Candace Owens, I've lost all respect that I ever had for her, and I always thought she was very articulate and pretty intelligent, but maybe not so. Go ahead.
She's going off the deep end. I mean, first of all, you're never going to agree with anybody 100% of the time. If you do, you need to see a psychiatrist because there's something wrong with you. And actually, there was somebody, I can't remember who it was a politician. He said, if you agree with me on 80% of the issues, vote for me. If you agree with me on 100% of the issues, you need to be committed. But what people need to realize is, okay, love him, hate him, in the middle. And, I like Trump. I'm not one of these that think he can't make a mistake. No, he can. Everybody can. He's human. Sure. But he's the president of the United States. He's the most powerful man in the world. And if you think you're more powerful or more important than him right now, you're an idiot. And that's what I see with the Steve Bannons. And I like Elon Musk. I have a ton of respect for him. He's a brilliant guy. But if it comes down, especially anything to do with the government, it comes down between his opinion and Trump's. Well, Trump's going to win because Trump's the president of the United States. If it comes down to business acumen and investing in innovation, I'll side with Elon because, he's proven himself. But he ain't the president. And so people need to get over their own egos. And all these people they have egos, they have success, but they mistake success for being infallible.
Yeah, I agree. So also, by the way, I'm going down this list of things that, represents who loses as a result of this. And I mentioned this to you just before you went live, speaking of legacy media. So there was a girl over here on ABC Live News just before we went live, and the anchor was asking this reporter her thoughts on this ceasefire, and her response was, well, we don't even know that Donald Trump had a thing to do with it, so we shouldn't be giving him credit for this. Okay, so they just can't get over themselves.
Well, yeah, because the Iranians and the Israelis, they talk every day. I think Benjamin Netanyahu has Ayatollah Khamenei on speed dial. I think they just talk and just text each other like they watch TV together and say, "Hey, did you see that? Who do you think did it?" Yeah.
Earlier today, I saw somebody who was commenting, pardon me, on developments, right? And I went back and checked their tweet because they had a tweet on a bunch of stuff which now doesn't matter because of the ceasefire. I went back and they corrected their post by saying, actually, probably the biggest loser is the torpedo manufacturers. If they're not going to close the Strait of Hormuz and whatnot. So if you're just joining us and you haven't heard, President Trump has negotiated a ceasefire between Iran and Israel. And this is precisely what he was after. He wanted lasting peace through strength. We'll see what happens over the course of the next 24 hours. I'm cautiously optimistic that we are going to have some sort of ceasefire between Iran and Israel. However, and this is a big however, I don't trust the Iranian government. I think that they would smile to your face while they're stabbing you in your back. And they have, significant assets here in America as far as sleeper cells are concerned. And we're going to talk through some of that as we had some of that lined up. But all things considered, we're in a better spot in the past hour than we have been in quite some time as far as Israel and Iran is concerned. So cautiously optimistic that the ceasefire that Donald Trump negotiated holds strong. And we'll move on from there. I want to mention, by the way, Jeff, so the guy who recognized me at Sam's Club, his name is Nader, Nader. And I took a screenshot of some of the text here because I didn't want to put his last name on. And he didn't ask me to black him out like this, but he did tell me way back when he approached me at Sam's Club that he's cautious when it comes to giving his name out to people because, he escaped the regime change in 1979. But he sent me some really interesting stuff, and I want to get your opinion, your take on this, because you're better educated than I am. But so I asked him what his thoughts were on the past 24 hours. So for those of you tuning in, this is a guy who grabbed me in Sam's Wholesale Club months ago, said he recognized me from Survival Dispatch, loved what we were doing, said he was a commando in Iran, that 400 of them were captured when the Shah was deposed and the Ayatollahs took power. And he was in a room where they were bringing 5 of these Iranian commandos in at a time. There was an executioner shooting them in the back of the head while they were on their knees. The executioner got called out. One of the mullahs was still in the room. He went to take his sidearm out. It got stuck in his robe. And the story is that this guy, Nader's his name, and the other 4 commandos managed to take the mullah down, take his gun, escape Iran, and come to America. I can't confirm that that's true, but he seemed like a pretty genuine guy, and he seemed very thankful to be here in America. So he sent me this, Jeff. So I hope Israel and President Trump chop the main heads off the most evil regime in the world so that 85 million Iranian hostages become free, make Iran free again, not make Iran great again. And then he sent me this article from the John Birch Society, which is, I don't know when this was printed, but maybe I'm wrong. February 21st, 1979, perhaps.
Yeah.
So basically, the gist of this is that he feels, and John Birch feels, that the Shah was murdered and the regime was put in place so that we could take advantage of Iran's significant natural resources, and that Jimmy Carter basically, was behind having the new current regime installed. I don't know if that's true or not. I want to hear your thoughts on it.
The current regime hates us, and we had more access to Iran's oil under the Shah. Yeah. In a related thing to your guy you met who at the gym, I met a guy in college. And this was 1979, 1980. I mean, when all this was happening, I was a freshman in college. And there were all these protests on campus, and this hostage situation was going on. And there was a guy there listening to these. There were some pro-Iranian people actually protesting on campus, of course, college campus. And I looked at him, and I said, I didn't want to say Iranian because I didn't want to alert anybody. So I leaned over to him. I said, "Are you Persian?" Okay. And he looked at me kind of surprised, and he goes, yes, I am. Anyway, so we started talking, and he was an Iranian, and he was in the United States studying. And I said, what do you think about all this? And he goes, it's horrible. And he was talking about when the Shah fell. And he goes, I called my parents and I said, yeah, I'm ready to come home. Do I need to come home? And they said, hell no. Are you nuts? We're trying to leave. If you come home, that's one more person. We have to get the hell out of the country, because they were supporters of the Shah and they saw the writing on the wall. And another really good friend of mine, we've been talking last, few days. He's an older guy. He's about 10, 15 years older than me, but he came out of Iran. He came to the United States, was going to school, married an American. And his father was the number 2 guy in the Presbyterian church in Iran. They're Christians.
Okay.
They're Persians, but they're Christians. And when the Shah fell, the mullahs came into the number 1 guy in the head of the Persian Presbyterian church and sat him down and said, you need to sign over all the properties, all the assets, everything of all the buildings, churches, everything in Iran, and give us the keys. And he said, I'm not going to do that. And they shot him in the head. And then they went to my friend's father, who was the number 2 guy, and said, okay, we need you to sign over all the property, all the deeds, and hand over the keys. And he signed it over and went to his family and said, we're getting the hell out of here. And he got his entire family the hell out of Iran.
Interesting.
That's Iran. That's the regime. And they just systematically killed anybody who got in their way.
So this is another text shortly afterwards from Nader as well, the guy who's the Iranian commando. So the agent of death and destruction, Carter and UK plus G7 bastard nations, installed the satanic regime in Iran in 1978 so they can loot Iran of all of its resources. But now the karma is wrapping around their own necks too. So that was kind of completing his thought on the previous text that he sent. But he sent this picture, 2016, of Trump and Melania, 1960, the Shah and his wife. And I don't know if it's photoshopped or not, but if it's not, it's an interesting picture of nothing else. But that's all I received from him on that stuff. And before we get any further, we're gonna look at things like nuclear stockpiles tonight, who has what. And I learned something new today. I was not aware of this, but Russia's here with 7,300. I don't believe that number. I'll tell you why in a second. But all the way down here, somebody named Jeff has less than 10.
That's me.
That begs the question, who the hell is Jeff?
I can't say how many I have, but it is definitely less than 10.
Too funny. Great sense of humor. I love those T-shirts, by the way, that say, of course I'm right. I'm Jeff. Anyway, all right, moving along. So again, if you just joined us, President Trump announced approximately an hour ago that he's negotiated a ceasefire between Iran and Israel. It'll fully kick in approximately 24 hours from now, a little bit less than that. And the proof will be in the pudding. We'll see if that's the case. But of course, the Democrats and the mainstream media are losing their minds because once again, they were wrong and Donald Trump was right. It'll be interesting to see what comes out of this, but let's back up to some of the content that we queued up earlier today as far as this conflict is concerned. And again, I think the Iranians are not trustworthy. And I think if the Iranians feel at a particular point in time that they can strike us and make it look like it's vis-a-vis proxy, which is their MO, right? Iran loves to use proxies and say, well, no, it wasn't us. It was those guys over there. But, oh, by the way, we funded those guys over there, but, it wasn't us, sort of thing. So earlier today, Iran fired a bunch of missiles, 13 in total, towards one of our bases in Qatar. And I got a video queued up here. If you're offended by profanity, turn your volume down just for a second. There's a U.S. service members pretty excited about this. It's a short video. It's 49 seconds. But the 13 missiles that Iran lobbed at our base in Qatar, one of them wasn't going to hit anything, so they didn't waste any money on it. every time we hit one of those, it's $4+ million out of our pocket. So if it was going nowhere important, just in the desert, they let it go. But the other 12 we intercepted, and that's what's shown in this video.
They're saying run.
That's us.
Yeah. That's us. Hell yeah, that's fuck yeah. Birds away!
So the brighter ones are ours, by the way.
Hey! Splash!
I suspect that's a THAAD, theater high altitude defense system.
It's impressive.
Yeah, it is.
It's really impressive.
Not a, Patriots are a little different. THAAD's a system, but they're all integrated.
So again, at the end of the day, this was earlier today, our time, obviously nighttime over there in the Middle East. Iran lobbed 13 of these missiles at our base in Qatar, however you want to pronounce it. We shot down 12. The 13th we just let land in the desert. So moving on from there, this was an ex-post made earlier today from a government account in Iran. In a clear threat to the U.S. and the West, Iran's Revolutionary Guards now warn they are ready to launch cruise missiles, declaring, "This is our message to the world. We will do it." Meanwhile, just a matter of hours later, let me have a quick look here. So approximately 7 hours after they posted this, Donald Trump posted that he negotiated the ceasefire. And again, we'll see the results of the ceasefire in the next 24 hours.
My question is, does that underground facility exist anymore?
Right.
That could be stock photo from 2 years ago. That may be rubble now.
So I don't refresh my memory. I'm not sure if I mentioned this or not. I may not have. Did I bring up the B-2 bomber pictures by chance?
On this show?
No, previously.
You're talking about the ones with the inside the B-2 bombers or the outside the B-2?
Outside. So I don't think I did.
I don't think so.
So somebody posted on X yesterday pictures of a B-2 bomber that had crashed, and it was missing a significant portion of the left side of the plane.
Was that the one that crashed on landing like 6 years ago or something like that?
Not quite. So, man, I can't believe I should have teed this up.
You're talking about the Joint Strike Fighter, and they have all the people around it?
Yeah.
It's all fake?
No, and that's just it. So let's just back up here quickly a second. Okay. I can't believe that I didn't have this queued up, but fortunately I have it on my desktop. So if you bear with me for just a second here, I will get this pulled up and I will show everybody what the results were and why this is important stuff. All right. So this is the picture right here. Okay. So this.
Oh, okay. That's a new one.
Yeah, so this picture was posted all over X yesterday, and the originating post was from an Iranian government account saying that the evil Satan, America, that they had managed to shoot down one of our B-2s. Ironically enough, less than an hour after this picture was posted yesterday, there were videos posted by people in Missouri showing the last of the B-2s landing back here in America, right? So there were all kinds of people going, okay, well, it's got to be AI generated. So I took it and I dropped it on Grok and I said, is this AI generated? And I'm going to show you what I came up with. And it said, no, it's not AI generated. I was like, okay, so I dropped it on Chat GPT because Chat GPT is much more advanced on the image side. So Grok excels at doing written research. Chat GPT can do written research, but excels at graphic stuff. I dropped it on there and it said, I'm going to show you the videos. I took screen captures of it, not just a screenshot. And it said something to the effect of, it does not appear to be AI generated. Would you like me to check these other aspects of this video or picture, pardon me? And I said, yeah, go ahead. It did it. It came back and it said, this is not an AI generated image. So I ended up dropping it on Claude. I've got subscriptions to half a dozen different AIs. I dropped it on Claude. It came back and said, no, this is not AI generated, but it's a real picture from Guam taken in 2008 when one of our B-2s crashed in Guam.
Yeah,
So,
we only have 19, but we bought 20. One crashed on landing. That's this one, obviously.
so the funny thing is that everybody thought it was AI. My first reaction, Jeff, when I found out it wasn't AI, was, holy crap, they've gotten really good at disguising all of the artifacts that would be left in something that was AI created. And again, so I use a ton of different AIs and for different purposes. And I'm glad I did. So let me see if I can pull up this screen grab here. Got so many things open. All right, let's try this one here. See if we can see that. 2 seconds. All right, here we go. So this is a screen capture that I did on ChatGPT. Is the attached image generated by AI? And I'll play the video and let it go a little bit there. So the image you provide appears to depict a crashed B-2 Spirit stealth bomber with debris scattered around the emergency personnel on site. Based on a visual analysis, the image does not immediately appear to be AI generated. The lighting, shadows, human figures, debris randomness, and surface textures are highly consistent with a real-world photograph. However, without access to metadata or forensic tools to inspect the image inconsistencies at the pixel level, I can't confirm with 100% certainty whether it's AI generated or authentic. If you like, I can perform an enhanced forensic style inspection for digital artifacts and inconsistencies typical of AI generated images. Would you like to do that? So I answered yes. And it turned around and spit the rest of this out. So stop it there. So based on the edge detection analysis, the image has highly consistent edge structure, particularly around aircraft debris, personnel, and terrain features. There are no signs of typical AI image generation artifacts such as warped hands, inconsistent lighting, or unnatural geometry. The details in the wreckage and uniforms, as well as the shadow behavior, are uniform and realistic, which is difficult for AI to render without anomalies at this resolution and scale. Conclusion: there is no indication this image is AI generated. It appears to be a real photograph, likely of a crashed B-2 Spirit stealth bomber, possibly taken during a post-crash investigation. If you want further verification, I can also check blah, blah, blah. Okay, so let's move on to the next one. And again, this is why I use multiple AIs, because when I dropped it on Claude, and I'm not the biggest fan of Claude, you know, as far as AIs are concerned. So let me stop that one and let's start the next one here. All right, let's see right here. Get that on stage. Boom. Okay, so we're over here on Claude now. So this is another video screen grab that I took. So is the attached image generated by AI? I can see this appears to be an image of a crashed military aircraft, specifically what looks like a B-2 Spirit stealth bomber based on its distinctive triangular flying wing designs. The aircraft appears to have suffered significant damage and is surrounded by emergency responders and investigators. Looking at the image quality, lighting, shadows, and overall composition, this appears to be a genuine photograph rather than an AI-generated image. The scene has the authentic characteristics of real crash site documentation, the way debris is scattered, the positioning of personnel, the natural lighting and shadows, and the overall photographic quality are consistent with actual views. However, I should search for recent information about B-2 crashes to verify if this corresponds to any actual incidents, as this would help to confirm this is a real photograph. So then it goes ahead and searches. Based on my search, this appears to be a genuine photograph from the February 23rd, 2008 crash of the B-2 Spirit of Kansas, at Anderson Air Force Base in Guam. This was the first operational loss of a B-2 bomber, with both crew members successfully ejecting. The image shows authentic crash scene, blah, 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 blah. So this whole thing on X yesterday, Jeff, the way it went is it gets posted by an Iranian government account saying we shot down a B-2, followed up by videos and announcements that all the B-2s had landed back in Missouri. Then everybody says, well, it's AI generated. Grok doesn't have very enhanced tools. It says it's not AI. ChatGPT, a little bit more advanced. It says it's not AI. And it took until I got to Claude to discover that this was an actual deal. So again, I thought to myself, holy crap, the Iranians are either getting really, really good at producing AI generated images that aren't detectable, or God forbid, did they actually shoot one of our B2s down? And lo and behold, they just took a picture from 2008 and put it up, which I thought was pretty interesting, to be honest with you. Rather sneaky of them, if nothing else, right? So it kind of gives you an idea on how much you can trust Iran. They'll
as far as I know, we've only lost one stealth aircraft ever in combat. That was an F-117 in over Serbia. And what happened there, what I found out, is they didn't detect the plane and shoot it down. They had a detection system which was really old but effective. And what it did, every time a switch opens or closes, there's a little bit of a flick, from a spark gap.
Yep.
And what they did is they had these sensors that were pointing up, and they were waiting till they heard clicking, which was, the 117 was constantly moving its control surfaces to maintain stability, because it's an inherently unstable platform.
Okay.
So it's constantly making these adjustments, and those are done electronically. And every time it did, there's a little click. So they were listening for the clicks. And when the clicks were overhead, they just sent up a barrage of missiles and got lucky. And that's all it was. They couldn't see it. It was invisible to them, but they heard the noise.
So confidential ID here. We're in the age of not being able to believe your eyes or ears. And that's a mouthful right there. That's very, very true. And, as people get more sophisticated at generating the fake content, it'll be a cat and mouse game of the good guys trying to figure out what the bad guys are doing. So there's huge opportunity for something that's just not true to be put off or passed off as being true. And if it's not discovered soon enough, you could just imagine what kind of chaos could ensue as a result of that. So anyway, with all of that being said, if you just joined us, Donald Trump negotiated a ceasefire between Israel and Iran. It was announced approximately an hour ago. It'll take full effect in the next, call it 23 hours or so. Let's hope that it sticks. For me, if it does stick, you've got a whole bunch of very disappointed Democrats, rhinos, anti-Trumpers, and legacy media. But peace through strength is what Donald Trump kept saying, and it looks like at this point in time, looks like he's delivered. Now, with all that being said, just to reel things back in again, I don't trust the Iranians. Jeff doesn't trust the Iranians. I don't know anybody who trusts the Iranian government, just to be clear. So we've got to come to grips with the fact that our border was thrown wide open for 4 years. I was on a conference call with JJ Carroll today, who most of you will know was a CBP special agent for 23 years. Some of the numbers that he ran by me, Jeff, are absolutely just insanity. Okay, so check this out. Like the CBP, like other law enforcement agencies, would work with the JTTF, the Joint Terrorism Task Force, right? So for those of you who don't know what the JTTF is, this is a federal body that coordinates all levels of law enforcement specific to terrorist activities, especially inside, our borders. So the process in the past, Jeff, used to be that when an SIA was apprehended at the border, so a special interest alien, that CBP was supposed to reach out to DHS and JTTF and say, hey, we got this special interest alien here at the border. And not only could they not keep up with the volume during the 4 years that Mayorkas and Biden threw the border open, they ended up actually closing down all the paths of communication, because they just said, you know what, you guys in CBP are just going to have to handle this. So publicly, DHS under Biden announced that there were 200,000 SIAs that came into the country during the 4-year tenure. And JJ, of course, was there at the beginning of that tenure and has connections there. He said the CBP has documentation showing that over 1 million SIAs were admitted to the country, special interest aliens. So these are aliens who either they're directly identified as a terrorist, part of a terrorist movement, sympathize with them, whatever the case may be, but they're bad people, and they're in our country. And JJ had a really interesting way of stating it. He said he was just on another TV show recently. He's spoken in front of Congress, and he's been on plenty of podcasts and TV shows, and the person was from the legacy media. And they were arguing with him and saying, well, there's no evidence that Joe Biden and Mayorkas let any of these terrorists into the country. And if they did, it's a very small number. So JJ started off, he said, well, let's just assume that 1 million people came across the border, even though we know it's way more than that. You know, Donald Trump's quoting 21 million right now. JD Vance is quoting 30 million. JJ Carroll is saying more like 40 million. But regardless, he said, this is what he said to this legacy media reporter. He said, okay, let's assume that it was only 1 million people that entered the country illegally during Biden's installation. And let's say that 1% of them are bad people. Well, that's 10,000 people. Are you okay with 10,000 terrorists in the country? And the person said back, well, you have no proof of that either. He said, okay, well, let's say it's 0.1%, 1,000 people. You got 1,000 terrorists in the country. We're going to do a deep dive into 9/11 soon and exposing how many of the conspiracy theories have been proven or anything, but let's just roll with this. Less than 24 people perpetrated the largest terrorist attack on America. So if less than 24 people did that, what could 1,000 terrorists do to our country? And even that, we know that the number is significantly higher than that. And he said, the legacy media person said, okay, yep, we're done. And ended the conversation.
Well,
So,
I worked with the JTTF at my last field assignment, and we were responsible. By we, I mean me and my office. We were the CIA rep for 1,000 miles, basically, of the U.S. southern border from El Paso to McAllen or to Brownsville, Texas. And we would get trace requests from the JTTF, from CBP. They'd pick some mope up on the border, and they'd get his bio data and all that stuff, and they'd send it to the JTTF. And if he was a Pakistani or an Iranian or something like that, a lot of times they would say, hey, do you guys have anything on this guy? And so we would run traces and look him up and see if we had anything on him. And they were always special interest aliens. They weren't just your, Jose, the melon picker. I mean, these were Iranians and Syrians and Cubans. But this was before Biden got in. This was actually before Trump got in. And I swear to God, we had 1, 2, 3, 4 of those a week. And that was when it was slow. Can you imagine how many and these are only the ones that they couldn't identify or they didn't have anything on. They would do their stuff. And if there were some that they couldn't figure out, they would send it to us. But it happened all the time.
So let me just back up so that the audience can get their head wrapped around what you're saying and what JJ Carroll said. JJ said that the apprehension of SIAs, special interest aliens, was so large that every means of reporting these SIAs to the JTTF and DHS were terminated, meaning all of the phone numbers were terminated. Yeah. The email addresses would respond back, no such address. The internal websites, all the submission forms, everything, Mayorkas shut it all down, every last bit of it, because JJ said the volume was so big that in a matter of weeks of Biden being installed, when you called the number for the JTTF, basically the bat phone for CBP to call JTTF, all it would say is this mailbox is full. And that was after the first few weeks. Oh, yeah. Imagine what happened over the years after. I mean, it's crazy.
There were CBP guys on the JTTF. The JTTF is the Joint Terrorism Task Force. It was in the FBI spaces, but it included FBI, local police, state troopers, CBP, air marshals. There were just all the law enforcement was there. We were not part of the JTTF because we're not law enforcement. All those guys carried guns and could arrest people and shoot them and all that. We didn't. But we were next door, and we worked with them every day. And if they had trace requests, if info came in, I remember one time CBP saw they had video of some guys climbing, coming across the border and carrying these Pelican cases, but they were long and thin, and we got measurements on them. And I talked to some of our paramilitary guys, and they go, that looks an awful lot like an SA-7 surface-to-air missile case, stuff like that. So we would help them whenever we could. I mean, we're all on the same team here, but I couldn't go arrest anybody. But yeah, we worked with them very closely, and we a lot of sharing of information there.
So Northwind 027, I don't trust the Iranians, but I trust them more than the Israelites, which is something I never thought I'd say. So I don't trust either of them myself. And Jeff, refresh my memory. Were you on last Thursday when JJ Carroll was with me?
Yeah.
Okay. So you'll remember this, but for anybody in the audience who didn't watch JJ Carroll on with us last week, I straight up asked him and said, what are your thoughts on Israel potentially lowering the Iron Dome enough to let a few missiles through to turn around and say, look, you got to come to our aid? And not just JJ Carroll, but other people I've spoken to all said that they would not put that past the Israelis at all if it was a low value target in particular, to let it come through and say, man, we're running low on munitions for the Iron Dome. You got to step in and help us and try to manipulate us. Now, I don't think Donald Trump could be that easily manipulated.
Well, I'm a little leery of that, because when a missile's coming in, the decision to intercept or not intercept is based on where it's going to land. And if you're running low on missiles, what they do is they basically, what's an acceptable loss? It's farmland, okay, it's an acceptable loss. If it's a lightly populated area, that's probably an acceptable loss. But if it's coming into downtown Tel Aviv, the Iranian missiles are kind of all over the place, so you never know exactly where in the hell the damn thing's going to land. I think that's kind of a bridge too far, because these are the guys that are going, yeah, we'll let that one go through. Well, it might be your apartment block that gets hit, and it's your wife and kids. I don't see them doing that.
Yeah, they're not.
Anything I see them saying, okay, we're running out of Iron Dome missiles, so we have to expand what we consider an acceptable loss and take our lumps. And everybody does that. You can't defend everything, so you prioritize. And as you run out of weapons, that priority list gets shorter. But I'll tell you what, people, complain about the Israelis all you want. I don't trust them either. I mean, we worked against them as much as we worked with them. But the thing about the Israelis, and keep in mind, their self-interest is not the United States. Their self-interest is Israel.
Absolutely.
They're trying to protect their country, their people, their everything. So if it comes down between protecting a U.S. interest and an Israeli interest, they're going to pick an Israeli interest. And I don't blame them.
Just want to address the Golden Eagle. So we made that announcement 48 minutes ago, Golden Eagle. We started this episode by announcing the ceasefire. So Donald Trump made a post on Truth Social 1 hour and 18 minutes ago announcing the ceasefire that he had negotiated. When we went live at the top of the hour 48 minutes ago, it was our lead story. So appreciate you sharing that. But for those people just tuning in, an hour and 18 minutes ago, Donald Trump announced that he negotiated a ceasefire between Israel and Iran. There's some time frames between now and tomorrow, but it looks like approximately 22 and a half hours from now, it will be an official end to what he's calling the 12-day war. So we covered that at length at the beginning of this live broadcast. And now we're talking with regards to the fact that none of us trust Iran. And there's still reason for us to be aware of the fact that our country has been flooded with undesirables, whatever you want to call them. So again, if you go back to the beginning of this video, you'll see that we kicked it off with the announcement on the ceasefire. We're cautiously optimistic. We'll see what happens by this time tomorrow. Hopefully it sticks. If it doesn't stick, I can see all hell breaking loose. But at this point, we're hoping that it does stick. So moving on from there.
Yeah, well, just real quick on that. What I said, there was the 6 hours. It's starting 6, and then at the end of 12, they'll consider the war over. what they're doing this first 6 hours was to, okay, you got planes in the air, let everything play out that's in action and that's in play. The next 6, I think it is, okay, we're doing a ceasefire in 6 hours. If it holds for 6 hours, that's the 12.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody shoots each other in those 6 hours, we're going to consider the war over. If both sides adhere.
Yeah, so I'll read it once again for the people who are just joining us. But we kicked off this episode 50 minutes ago announcing the ceasefire. So this was posted 1 hour, 20 minutes ago on Donald Trump's Truth Social account. Congratulations to everyone. It's been fully agreed by and between Israel and Iran that there will be a complete and total ceasefire in approximately 6 hours from now, which right from now would be 4.5 hours, 4 hours, 40 minutes. When Israel and Iran have wound down and completed their in-progress final missions for 12 hours, at which point the war will be considered ended officially. Iran will start the ceasefire, and upon the 12th hour, Israel will start the ceasefire, and upon the 24th hour, an official end of the 12-day war will be saluted by the world. During each ceasefire, the other side will remain peaceful and respectful. So, all things considered, it's good news. But it doesn't mean that we can ignore the fact that our border was thrown wide open for 4 years. And regardless of whose numbers you want to believe, there's a whole lot of people in our country that shouldn't be here, that hate America, and will do whatever orders they're given, whatever marching orders they're given to hurt us. And there is tons of open source intelligence. If you don't believe us, go look up the open source intel on how significant the threat is. We're not trying to spread fear, though. We've said many times on Survival Dispatch News, we're not changing the way that we live. We're not going to hide. We're not going to cower, but we are going to be, at a high level of situational awareness when we're in public. And that's what we're trying to make sure that other people adopt that same stance and don't go out in public with their face buried in a weapon of mass distraction like this. That's easy pickings, right? So this next one, Jeff, obviously we put it in before the ceasefire was announced, but I left it in for a very specific reason. So this was posted earlier today. New York Times intelligence officials have detected signs. Sorry, it was posted last night at 5:42 p.m. Eastern. New York Times intelligence officials have detected signs that Iran-backed militias are preparing to attack U.S. bases in Iraq and possibly Syria. I heard there was one missile somewhere around the base in Iraq, but the 13 that were shot at Qatar, we shot down 12 of them. The 13th, we let it just go land in the desert. The reason I left this in is that occasionally there's something like this that gets posted by the legacy media that's accurate. It's not very often, but occasionally something like this. So this yesterday essentially predicted the attacks today to a certain extent. So moving on from there, this article is actually from Great Britain. So you can tell who it is. I'm not going to say. I have to hide their logos because one of the platforms that we broadcast to, the second that they see anything related to the name of this particular website, the founder's name was Andrew. That should give you all the clues you need. And he died a number of years ago at a young age. If we say that on CommieTube in particular, they shut us down. If you try to put a link from these guys in a video description on CommieTube, the save button gets grayed out and you can't save the description for the video. It's more censorship. Big surprise. So this article, though, is on the UK. Domestic threat of attack by Iranian agents and proxies significant may rise, warns UK government. This was posted earlier today. A minister of the British government said attacks by Iranian intelligence on the UK are already regularly ongoing, and the threat may well increase as conflict progresses in the Middle East. Now, we have this ceasefire. Let's hope that it sticks. But I included this for a very specific reason. We had Christopher Wray, and now we've had Kash Patel and others say that we have all kinds of evidence that known terrorist groups, Hezbollah in particular, have plans to attack us, that they have sleeper cells here in America. So here's a number for you, by the way. So some of you may not know that Don Mann, one of our favorite people in the whole world, Don was a Navy SEAL. He served for 20 years in the Navy. Then he was CIA, which is where he met Jeff, and they served together for 2 decades. And Don Mann, and he said this publicly, so I'm not betraying his trust, 2 years ago, Don Mann on Survival Dispatch News said that in the 1990s, we were tracking over 300 known terrorists in the country. And that number's only gone up exponentially since then. So we could argue all day long as far as what the numbers are, but with the border being wide open for 4 years, the sky's the limit, right? It could be a lot. Now, I included this, Jeff, for the very specific reason to show, yes, we've had these warnings from domestic agencies, but this is also international governments saying the same thing, that they have concerns that Iranian proxy terrorists are going to attack. And for those of you new to Survival Dispatch News, just a quick bit of information for you. There are two parts to Hezbollah. There's Hezbollah in the Middle East, which is funded directly by the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. It's state-sponsored terrorism. Outside of the Middle East, Hezbollah refers to themselves as Unit 910. That doesn't mean there's one unit. That's the entire world except for the Middle East. And they are self-funded. And that means that they've had to find ways to pay their own bills. And what they did in the 1990s is they started forming alliances with the cartels in Mexico. Here we are 30 years later, and you have Hezbollah members in Mexico who look and sound identical to cartel members. The accent's the same, the appearance is the same. You would be very hard pressed to be able to identify them as, let's say, Iranian terrorists. Why did they team up with the cartels? Well, they make money together. So when the Chinese send precursors to fentanyl to Mexico, Hezbollah and the cartels have these rudimentary labs. They make the fentanyl, and then they smuggle it across the border, and Hezbollah therefore funds their operations. The other thing that they've been heavy into with the cartels is child sex trafficking, which is a horrible subject that we've covered ad nauseum. So moving on from there, I've got this bulletin was just published yesterday by the National Terrorism Advisory System. So it's from the DHS, and it's a summary of the threat to the United States. This PDF is available on their website, dhs.gov/advisories, if you want to grab it. The ongoing Iran conflict is causing a heightened threat environment in the United States. Low-level cyber attacks against U.S. networks by pro-Iranian hacktivists are likely, and cyber actors affiliated with the Iranian government may conduct attacks against U.S. networks. Iran also has a long-standing commitment to target U.S. government officials it views as responsible for the death of an Iranian military commander killed in January 2020, Salamini. The likelihood of violent extremists in the homeland independently mobilizing to violence in response to the conflict would likely increase if Iranian leadership issued a religious ruling calling for retaliatory violence against targets in the homeland. And it goes on to give more information there. Suffice it to say, we've got a ceasefire. Looks like we've got a ceasefire. It officially kind of kicks in about 23 hours from now, 22 and a half hours. We'll see what happens then. We'll see how long it holds up. But even if it does hold up, our position still remains that we have a whole bunch of people in the country who hate us and are highly likely to engage in terrorist activity. Terrorists are going to terrorize, right? That's kind of the gist of it. So before we move on, we've got a handful more to cover. We typically try to wrap up top of the hour. We're going to go just a couple minutes past, so I won't be able to share everything that we had queued up for tonight. But I do want to mention, I want to say thank you to all of our guardians. If you go to Substack, survivaldispatchnews.com, sign up for a free account, you'll get our weekly watch guide. And so when you don't get notifications that we've published content, whether it's JJ Morris, Jason Sawyer, or Survival Dispatch News, it's all in one spot. It's free. It doesn't cost you a penny. But the people who do pay for memberships and our sponsors like CCW Safe and Carnivalt, which I got another delivery of this stuff today, Jeff. It's pretty outstanding, to be quite honest. If you patronize our sponsors like CCW Safe and Carnivalt, it allows us to bring you the truth instead of punching a time clock for somebody else. We don't get anything for each bag of this that sells. It's just that if we can generate traffic for them, then they keep sponsoring us and we can keep bringing you the truth. So I'm going to go through some stuff pretty quickly here, Jeff, just to hit on things. We publish a weekly threat matrix. This is the one that was published on Sunday. We probably every week. And typically we look at the top 3 threats that we're facing in America. This one on this Sunday was just on the Iranian threat because it's so significant. And I stand by the content that we published on Sunday. The probability of Islamic terror cells being activated in America are significantly high. And law enforcement, all agencies, top to bottom, agree with that as well. It's based on a number of things like historical patterns of Iranian state-sponsored terrorism, ceasefire or not, the current geopolitical context, and specific threats posed by extremist groups. So if you're a member over on our Substack, you have access to this every week. This just gives you an idea of the type of content that we bang out behind the scenes that you may not see in a podcast. I want to say it's about a 1,500-word essay that I wrote on this particular topic. Moving on quickly from there. So I've been using Venice AI lately, Jeff, because I've been getting a fair bit of grief from some of the other AIs where it says, well, I can't give you conservative opinion on a topic because that wouldn't be fair. So it wants to give me all this woke stuff, right? So I'll leave it and I'll come back and I'll, say reset the conversation, and I'll say, give me a report on this particular topic from a far left woke progressive perspective, and it'll spit out reams of information. So you can't trust the AIs. Many of them are programmed by woke left progressives, and that's all it spits out. But Venice is uncensored, and I don't get anything from these guys. I don't represent them. I don't have an affiliate code or anything, but I'm super impressed with Venice, and they publicize themselves as uncensored AI essentially, and I would say it's true. So I asked it, how significant is the threat of terrorist attacks on the U.S. homeland? This is just like late this afternoon. The threat of terrorist attacks in the U.S. homeland in 2025 remains significant and multifaceted. Several key factors contribute to this heightened threat environment, domestic extremism. So it's still snuck in that wokeness, and I left it in there to show that even when you say give it to me from a conservative perspective, it'll still try and insert this. So you have to pay attention to what it's actually giving you. FTOs, foreign terrorist organizations, political and socio-political factors. So now they're talking things like Antifa and whatnot, international conflict, cyber threats, anti-government sentiment, soft targets like public gatherings and events, and technological vulnerabilities, meaning cyber attacks. But it also points out, rightfully so, the other way, low-tech attacks like the New Orleans attacker driving a truck into people. So the next thing I asked it, Jeff, is how big is the threat of Iranian biologic attacks? And it spit back some rather interesting information on how Iran has threatened biologic attacks, but has never done it. So I'm going to stop on that topic because I want to hear your thoughts as far as Iran threatening in the past that they would use biological weapons of mass destruction, but we have zero evidence that they have any of these weapons.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't say zero. We know they've looked into it. We know they've researched it. We don't know that they have produced them, stockpiled them, or perfected delivery mechanisms.
2 seconds, Jeff. Ron, we opened this podcast over an hour ago by announcing the ceasefire, but thank you for mentioning it. But that was our opening story. We've moved on since then. Sorry to interrupt, Jeff. Go ahead.
No, and the delivery method. You can grow anthrax, but a vial of anthrax isn't nearly as dangerous as a weaponized anthrax, where it sporates and you grind it to the right particle size, and there's more work involved than people think. Does Iran have the technology to do it? Absolutely. They can microencapsulate. They can do all sorts of stuff. I worked on that. They were one of my targets when I was in the agency. And BW was my pet project. But we have never seen them deploy it. It's like we have seen Saddam do. We saw Saddam do all sorts of stuff with chemical weapons against the Iranians, against his own people. The Iranians did chemical weapons back. But as far as biological weapons go, other than what I call kind of quasi-chemical weapons like ricin. Ricin is a poison. It's a biologically derived poison, but it is not a biological agent in that it grows and reproduces like anthrax or Ebola or Marburg or something like that. So I have never seen evidence of them deploying it. That doesn't mean they don't have the capability, but I don't think they have, kind of a strategic level capability.
Gotcha. That's interesting that was one of your pet projects, and I knew you had knowledge on it that I don't have. So here's the next thing, because after we opened discussing the ceasefire, you brought up the Strait of Hormuz, and so this is earlier today. Iran's parliament backs blocking Strait of Hormuz. Its closure would alienate Tehran further. Even in the subheadline here, it goes on to describe how China buys a tremendous amount of oil from Iran. Go ahead and describe what happens to Iran's oil experts once again for the people who joined us late if they close the Strait of Hormuz.
Well, they close the Strait of Hormuz. They can't export oil either. All of their export facilities are west of the Strait of Hormuz, and everybody exits the Strait of Hormuz to the east. So their big one is Karg Island. It's up near Kuwait. It would be cut off. Bandar Abbas, which is just north of Strait of Hormuz, it would be cut off. There is Iranian territory to the west of it, but there are no export facilities, no ports, no pipelines, no nothing. So they would not only, they would starve themselves. Their only thing they can export then would be natural gas via Turkey and Tabriz, unless they would do it overland in trucks. But yeah, that's not efficient.
So I've got a really interesting map, and I just nuked about half of the tabs I had open for the balance list because I'm trying to get us to the finish line. But while we're on the topic of oil, so this account on X, the Kobisi letter, they call themselves, and one of their focuses is oil markets and oil prices and so on and so forth. And they started the day by saying, if you think Iran is going to escalate things and they're going to close the Strait of Hormuz, you're wrong. This was before the ceasefire was announced. And if you want to know why you're wrong, the price of oil is falling like it's never fallen in recent years. And, basically their argument is that if the global markets thought that Iran was going to restrict the flow of oil, that would be decreased supply while demand stays high, increased prices, and that's not happening. So there's a ton of posts today on their X account, and there's ones that actually show it even more dramatic than this, but we're below $70 a barrel for the first time in quite a while, 67.36. And again, this was before the ceasefire was announced. This was at 4:09 p.m. Ceasefire was Eastern time. The ceasefire was announced by Trump at 6:30 p.m. Eastern time. So just an interesting indicator of what the market actually thought of the claims that Trump was going to cause this huge increase in oil because the Iranians are going to shut down the Strait of Hormuz, which you just so eloquently described why they would not do that. So here's a short video, 1 minute 7 seconds long. I'm going to play the whole thing. We played a video last week that showed the number of military aircraft in a similar style of video. This is showing who has the most nukes. Now, be aware, there's some fine print. A lot of the countries in here, they don't have nukes in their own military, but they've given us the ability to place our nukes on their soil, so it's counted in here. But I have a bone of contention with this, and I'm going to speak to it at the end of this video, and then I'm going to let Jeff roll with it because he'll put more meat on the bone.
Do you know the country with the most nuclear bombs in the world? Japan has -2.
Sorry, that's a bit of humor.
Yeah.
-2.
Netherlands has 10.
US deployment
Has 15.
Yeah, ditto.
Turkey has 20.
Ditto.
Germany has 20.
See where it says U.S. deployment?
Those are our nukes.
Correct.
Italy has 35. North Korea has 50.
Those are theirs.
Israel has 90.
Also theirs.
Pakistan has 170.
Let's just make a note, though. Pakistan has 170 fission style nukes. So the old
They're not
technology,
thermonuclear. They are
these
not,
thermonuclear.
In
Correct.
fact, most of these are not.
And there's a bit, explain the difference while we're on this, Jeff, between fission style thermonuclear and their powerfulness.
Yeah, there's a difference between an atomic bomb and a hydrogen bomb. You need a hydrogen bomb that actually uses an atomic bomb as a detonator. But the problem with a thermonuclear bomb is that it requires either lithium-6, deuterium, or tritium, which are both gases, but they break down over time. So you have to have a constant supply of deuterium, usually tritium, constant supply, because you have to re-up the tritium because it breaks down over time. So you got to constantly re-up
Okay.
it. Whereas a fission bomb, a uranium bomb or plutonium bomb, you can put that bad boy on the shelf for, well, not forever, but for a long time. So, and if you want a tactical bomb, you're not going to have a thermonuclear. You're going to have a regular fission bomb.
And so the other part to this, of course, is that the fission bombs are big and heavy, and you have to shrink them to thermonuclear size, which is more powerful, but you can send them further distances on missiles, essentially.
Yeah, a fission bomb you can make pretty small. Thermonuclears are a little bit bigger, but they're getting pretty small too. Yeah, it's technology improves.
Let's play the balance of this here.
India has 172. United Kingdom has 225. France has 290. Third China has 500. Second US has 5,244.
All right, so here's my bone of contention. Mike Sterling has spoken at length. I'm going to let Jeff speak at length, but a significant number of Russian nukes are just flat out duds. They would do things like put water in tanks instead of fuel so that the local
Those are the
commander
rockets, not the warheads.
Right, not the warheads. But their ability to deliver nukes is far overstated, according to Mike Sterling.
Yeah, now this is the warheads, and they may have, they have this many. It's all by treaty. That's where these numbers come from on us and Russia. It's the START treaties and the SALT treaties and all that.
But I'm getting at their ability.
Delivery is the issue.
Yeah,
ours go when we hit the button, our rockets launch. Theirs,
maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
Mike Sterling is fond of saying the Russians are really good at creating weapons of mass destruction once.
Yeah, I always say Russians can build one of anything. They have some very good scientists and very good chemists and all that. Mass production is their Achilles heel.
All right, so we're getting down to the short strokes here. This is the map I wanted you to comment on as well. So the question is Iran the most naturally fortified country due to its terrain? I mean, it's surrounded by mountainous regions that we know are pretty inhospitable. These are the same types of mountain ranges that you would see to its east over in Afghanistan. Thoughts about that, Jeff, as far as trying to invade Iran with ground forces?
Well,
not that we're not, before somebody puts something in the comments, we're not suggesting anybody's invading Iran. Israel had said last week if we didn't help them bomb Iran that they would consider ground troops, but it's pretty tough terrain to do that in.
Well, Israel doesn't have enough people to do it, first of all.
Right.
There's 92 million Iranians. Yeah, that looks like there's a lot of this rough terrain, blah, 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 but there's, you got to look at, that's a big country. Iran is like a third the size of the United States, the lower 48 or a quarter. That's a lot of territory. So when you see these mountains on the map, that may represent hundreds of miles, and you can get around. It's like Arizona. If you look at Arizona, it probably looks like that on a map too. But believe me, all those mountains are sticking up in the middle of the desert. You can drive around them, so it's not that big of a deal. But again, we're not invading Iran, and most of that is unoccupied. It's vast, empty desert.
I just thought it was an interesting graphic that they posted on their X that it's not the most hospitable terrain, put it that way.
No, but it's not Switzerland.
Yeah. All right. So moving on from there, this story is the reader story of the night. So I want to give a shout out to Taz, who submitted this. 145 French women targeted with needle attacks during Festival of Music 2025 across France. And I'm not going to read the article. It's easy to find. If you want it, just send an email to support@survivaldispatch.com. Happy to send it to you. I would put it into the chat, but this will actually trip some of the censorship on CommieTube and other platforms. So that aside, I will give, you know what? We haven't done an audience poll yet tonight. Let's do an audience poll. All right. So for those of you who think the bad guys referenced in this story are sometimes referred to as invaders, sometimes referred to as goat lovers. Sometimes they might wear a towel in place of clothing on their head. If you think that that might be the demographic behind these attacks, put a 1 in the live chat, whatever platform you're on. If, on the other hand, you think this is middle-aged white guys, which, you know, American left loves to attack, put a 2 in the chat. But so if you think these guys are the goat lovers that perpetuated this, put a 1. If you think it's, you know, the rest of us, put a 2. Be interested to see what you've got to say, but it is all, I can tell you this much, it is one group when you read the article across the board from countries like Bangladesh, etc.
Well, the question is what they stick them with. Did
So
they just jab with a needle, or did they inject something?
they injected. So a lot of them, it was GHB, the date rape drug.
Oh, Jesus.
So that's bad enough, right? Like the GHB is bad enough in itself, but the thought occurred to me, if somebody's that big of a scumbag that they would hit somebody with a needle in public, I'm pretty sure it's probably not hygienic. No. So how many of those needles have other crap on them that could potentially infect somebody, you know, like with hepatitis or something to that effect? So put it this way, like our audience, clearly we have a very smart audience. Every single person who's responded. And again, I'm watching all these different, like if y'all haven't seen Mission Control, this is my main desk. And then over here is a couple, oh, I've got to move out of the way of the camera there. There's a couple more monitors. I keep going over there and then another one over here. So it's kind of like NASA Mission Control, just different. So anyway, that being said, I'm watching all these live chats going on and everybody got this one right. Congratulations, Survival Dispatch audience, for proving our assertion that you're very astute. All right, so we're going to hit the conflicted question of the night and wrap this thing up. We're running a little bit long here. So you and your group have been surviving at your retreat after the shit hits the fan, SHTF. But other people weren't so lucky. From time to time, someone finds your group and begs for food. Today, however, a man is asking for some type of a test or a way to prove he is worthy to be part of your group. What would you tell him? Jeff, I'll let you take the first swing at that.
Well, my first question would be to myself, do we need more people in our group? If you've got a group, if you've got supplies and facilities that are set up for 20 and you've got 20, why do you need 21? Now, if you're looking to expand your group, I might, and you kind of like the cut of the guy's jib, so to speak. You know, he's not a total jerk and he seems reasonable and he's relatively young and in shape, and you think he might have something to bring to the group. I would say, okay, is there something we need? And can he go out, procure it, and bring it back? Be it medicine, antibiotics, bandages, whatever. But I would also want to find out, where did he get it? Did he rob another group to bring it to us? In which case, what's he going to do to us when we're not looking?
Yeah. So my thoughts on this are pretty simple. If my gut had a decent feeling about this guy, I would give him a chance to prospect, much like a motorcycle club would. If I got a bad vibe though, depending on the context of the situation, I may not necessarily say absolutely not, you know, get out of here, because now you've got somebody potentially running around who wants to do you harm or take stuff from you. So I'd have to think of what I don't have an answer if I had a bad gut feeling at the time, because I would want to handle that diplomatically so we didn't turn him into an enemy, even if we didn't accept them. But I would make him prospect for a period of time, and I wouldn't tell him how long that time is either. I would, which is the way motorcycle clubs do it. You know, some people prospect for 6 months, some people prospect for a year, some people prospect for 2 years before the other club members vote on it. I'll tell you one thing I would would enforce quite heavily in my group, unanimous vote. Yeah. I would not let anybody in who didn't get a unanimous vote, because once you bring somebody in that other people have said no, it starts to create factions and problems. and like on that subject, I was asked by UCF about 10 years ago to resurrect the CEO exchange for Central Florida. And they had 3 contingencies of CEOs, and it had dwindled down to 4 people. So they went from about 50 CEOs to about 4. And I decided to take it on. And I went to all the people who quit, Jeff, and I said, give me the top 3 reasons why you left the CEO exchange, which is a cooperative effort between the University of Central Florida and the SBA. And almost every one of them said, we had no say who was in our group. So they limited the contingencies to like 12, 13 people. Okay. And these are people you're meeting with once a month to share your confidential information on. And one of the guys said that a marketing guy was brought to the table, and this marketing, they didn't have somebody in their group from a marketing firm. And this guy was really successful. He was really good. But the guy I spoke to said, you know what? That guy was my marketing contractor. I outsourced everything for my business to him, and I don't want him to know my confidential information. And they let the guy into the group, so I quit because I'm not showing him my financials and talking about this stuff.
Yeah.
So I'm just saying it's an anecdotal example. I've seen this firsthand. You better have unanimous consent unless you want to create some friction, is really what it boils down to. So that's it for that. John will be back tomorrow night with his take on the developments, the ceasefire and other developments. Hopefully by the time John goes on air tomorrow night, 7 p.m. Eastern, as usual, this ceasefire will have been proven to at least get off the ground. I don't know how long it'll last, but at least get off the ground. So John tomorrow night will be back for that. Other than that, go to survivaldispatchnews.com, sign up for a free account. You'll get our weekly watch guide, plus a whole ton of other content, by the way, that we give away for free. Doesn't cost you a penny. Other than that, I think that's it, Jeff. I appreciate your time and your insight as per usual. Please like, share, comment, subscribe. Enjoy the closing video. God bless everyone.